name is Candice Byrd, and I was listening to these stories, and I was reminded of some of the stories that I've heard too growing up, and some of the experiences that I've had. And this story is technically about my brother, because he was always getting into things that he ought not to be getting into. I can remember as little kids, we were told to never still be playing outside when it's dark. Well, there's a place called Dwight Mission, and it's down south in Cherokee country, and it's the place of an old boarding school. And there's a cemetery right next to it. Now, we had always grown up hearing that a bunch of kids died in a fire in this boarding school. And, you know, growing up we thought, well, that may or may not be true. Might be true, might not be true. But my brother, he was a little kid. And my dad was at a conference, an overnight conference at this Dwight Mission place. And it was dusk, the sun was going down, and my brother found this tetherball court. And he was the only kid there for some reason. When my dad was attending his meetings, my brother decided to go out and play with this tetherball. And he's just kind of swinging it around, you know, just kind of hitting it lazily. And the sun keeps going down, and it's going down, and it's getting darker. And my brother's just hitting that tetherball. He's not really paying attention. He's just playing with that tetherball, and he's just hitting it, and it's going round and round. And then all of a sudden, he feels it being served back to him. And he's like, oh, Dad's come out to play with me, okay. So he starts hitting that ball back, and starts hitting that ball back. Well, that ball keeps getting back and keeps being served right back to him. And my brother's, he's just not paying attention. He's just having a grand old time, just hitting that ball back and hitting it back harder and harder, until he hears my dad call him from across the way, and he says, "Son, what are you doing? What are you doing still playing? It's getting dark out. You need to come back home. You need to come back this way." And my brother stops, and he realizes that he can't see who's playing with him. So he stops, and he runs back to my dad. And my dad, he holds him, and he realizes that his son is scared. And he says, "What's the matter, son? What's the matter?" And my brother says, "Dad, I was out here playing tetherball, and I couldn't see who was playing with me." And my dad says, "Well, you know what I told you about playing outside when it's dark." So my brother never did that again. Now, that was my brother's experience. I never had an experience like that until I started working at the Cherokee Heritage Center as a tour guide. I used to play the flute for the villagers, or for the tourists that would come through. And I was the only one who played the flute, and it was just something I was happy to do. And we had always been taught too that you're not supposed to talk to the darkness. You're not supposed to talk to something that's not there. And there used to be this little changing area. We would dress out in our 17th century, 1710 clothes. And then after the day was over, we would come back and we would put on our normal street clothes. And I was waiting to change, and I remember I was knocking on the door and in the changing room, and I remember I asked, "Is anybody in there?" And I heard a voice that said, "Yeah, someone's in here." And I thought, "Oh, that sounds like my coworker. That sounds like Steve or Danny." And so I just sat down and I just waited, and I waited and I waited a little bit more, and it usually didn't take the guys very long to change. But I kept waiting, and then I saw Danny come back into this room, this waiting room area, and he wasn't in the changing room, and he says, "Candice, what are you waiting for?" And I said, "You?" And he says, "Candice, there's no one in that changing room." And so I thought, well, okay, that's weird. That's odd. Maybe I didn't really hear anything. Maybe I didn't hear anything that day. But then I saw another coworker. Her name was Morgan. After I got through changing, I came outside, and it had been at least about an hour before closing, and nobody been in the village for at least 30 minutes, because everybody had changed back into their street clothes. And I go outside and I see my coworker, Morgan, and she looks at me and she just stares at me, and I can tell that something's wrong. And I said, "Morgan, what's up?" And she just says, "Nothing." And she turns and she walks away, and I thought, something's really up with Morgan. And she wouldn't tell me what was wrong until the next day. And I said, "Morgan, what was wrong? Why did you give me this scared look?" And she said, "I heard the flute being played in the village, and you weren't in the village. And it sounded just like your flute. I have a cedar flute. It has a very distinct sound. I play similar melodies." And she said it sounded like your flute. It sounded like you were playing. And you know, we had been told about things like this, and I thought to myself, something is playing with me out here. But oddly enough, I didn't get scared. I got kind of annoyed. I thought, somebody's trying to pretend to be me playing my flute. And so I just stopped and I prayed about it, and I asked them to stop. And then I never heard about flute noises or anything talking back to me again. So those are my experiences that I've had and that my brothers had. And I'd like to share one more story with you. It's an older story that my grandma used to tell. And it's an old Quapaw story. She used to call it the teenagers in the pit. And she said that when she was a young girl, her Wetsiko, her grandpa, used to tell her this story. They used to tell the story about how when they used to live in a big village, the kids weren't doing their jobs. The young people, they weren't listening to their elders. They were just running off and playing and dancing and doing whatever. And the elders and the parents and the adult people, they had things to do. There were jobs to be done. There was water to be drawn. There were things to be made. And you know, there was hunting to be done, fishing to be done, nets to be mended. You know, the normal workings of everyday life in a village. And they needed the help of the young people, but the young people would not help. And no matter how much their elders and the adults tried to get them to help, they just didn't want to help. It just blew them off every time. And so the elders thought, well, we need to do something about this. We have to teach them a lesson. So the elders gathered together, and they thought to themselves, and they planned amongst themselves, well, what is it that they want? Maybe if we just give them what they want, maybe they'll help us. Maybe. And so they came up with this plan, and they went to their children and the young people, and they told them, when you guys get together and you're dancing around and you're singing and you're not working, you're making way too much noise for us over here, where we're trying to concentrate on what should be done. So what we're going to do is we're going to dig this giant pit for you. We're going to put you in the pit, and we're going to give you anything you want, anything you ask for. Ask for it, and it's yours. And the young people, they got really excited about this, and they started asking for a new drum, new comb for their hair, new moccasins, things that they could, make songs and dance with and just have a party with, have a good time with. And so the elders and the adults listened, and they put all of those things in this pit. And so the kids, the young people, they climbed down into the pit, and they began to sing and drum, and they dance and they sing all night long. They're just having a great time. And in the middle of the night, their elders and their adults took the village and moved it far away. And they didn't come back. Till years later, they come back to the pit,